practicing witch and a professional tarot nerd. And today, I'm a storyteller. And I'm glad you're here. It's spooky season again, and this is another little story in a series I'm calling The 13 Days of Halloween. I know it's not an inspired title, but I couldn't pick the obvious one because of a movie of some renown. I grew up out in the country, and when I was growing up, well, there were some adventures to be had, and some were hilarious, and others were exciting, and some were even a little bit mysterious and spooky. Now, all these stories are true, even if they didn't happen. Bridgers Road was a major thoroughfare outside the town where I grew up. Now, you need to know something. Out in the country, major thoroughfare doesn't mean quite the same thing it does in the city. It's not about how many lanes there are or how many businesses there are along the way. It's more about how well maintained the road is and the places that it connects. And this was certainly Bridgers Road. I had a friend who lived out that way, and I drove out there often to visit. The road was first built in the early 1900s as a way for Wayne Bridger to get his crops to market. It didn't really go anyplace. It just connected his farm with the town. And at the time, the town was really not much more than a wide spot in the road. But Mr. Bridger was successful. He was a good farmer, and he managed to grow cotton, peanuts, and corn, and a wide variety of vegetables. And as he acquired more land, he established orchards of apples, peaches, and pecans. The farmland was in this gentle holler, and Mr. Bridger was able to build a good life for his family there. A little creek ran through the middle of it and provided the family with all the water they needed for their needs. And the land was fertile, and the hills around were always verdant and green. Hollis Bridger was the oldest child of what became a very large family. And folks that knew him regarded him well and said that he was an honest, kind, and polite, thoughtful man. When the United States entered World War II, Hollis Bridger enlisted in the Army. He was in his early 20s at the time. He served in the infantry, participated in the D-Day invasion, and was later captured during the Battle of the Bulge in France. He was relocated to a POW camp in Dresden and was there when Allied air forces bombed the city, razing it to the ground. In spite of all this, Hollis managed to survive. After his repatriation and discharge from the Army, Hollis Bridger returned home to continue farming that family farmland. He married his sweetheart, and they planned to continue the Bridger family tradition of farming. In 1949, Hollis and Dorothy Bridger were expecting their third child. The family farm was still successful, but that summer was hard. There in the holler, the summers had been growing increasingly warm each year, seemingly in spite of the generally mild weather in the state. It was early August, and Hollis was out tending one of the fields on his tractor when a fire suddenly erupted and spread rapidly through the holler. No one ever really figured out what caused it, though. Some said it must have been caused by that tractor, or maybe a stray spark from that pipe Hollis always seemed to have in his mouth. No one ever really seemed to know what caused that fire. Now, what they did know was that fire tore through the fields at an unbelievable pace, stopping short of the Bridger family home by only yards. Other than that house, nothing remained on that farm that wasn't burned. Like I said, the smoke could be seen from that fire for miles all around. Now, Hollis's body was found at the bank of that creek in the holler, one arm stretched out as if reaching for that cooling water. But that summer, there was no water in that creek. That creek had been dry for months. After the tragedy, the Bridger family did their best to rebuild the farm. But that farm and the family were never the same again. Crops just wouldn't grow there anymore. And maybe it was the result of that fire. No one could really say. But after that, the former cropland was converted to pasture and the family raised cattle instead. Now each summer they struggled to keep those cattle watered, as it was always hotter in that holler than the surrounding areas. And it was said that during early August, the holler always smelled of smoke. The family resorted to digging several ponds in the pastures, far more than should have been needed, to collect water for their cattle. In the late 60s, the county was building new roads and put one through the middle of what had been that Bridger farm. And when I was growing up, I often wondered why that road had been raised so much above grade as it passed through that holler. Later, I found out why. I was headed home from my buddy's house early one August when my benighted car began to overheat. That happened sometimes in the summer with my old car. So I pulled over and stopped to allow the engine to cool. After all, you don't really want to be poking around in a hot engine, right? I got out of the car to raise the hood, and let me tell you, it was hot outside. Now, I grew up in the South and was used to the heat, but I never really enjoyed it much. I prefer the cooler weather, even more so since that summer. When I raised the hood to look the engine over, I smelled smoke. At first, I thought that engine was toast, but I realized that what I was smelling was wood smoke. And although the air was clear, I started to cough. And it seemed to me that the air had grown even hotter. It had become oppressive, and I looked around thinking that maybe the hot tailpipe on my car had started a fire on the side of the road, but there was no fire there. It was becoming difficult to breathe, and I felt like I was standing too close to a bonfire. My friend, he didn't live too far away, so I decided to walk to his house to get some help. I'd only taken a few steps down the road when I was overcome and fell to one knee. My vision was dim, and maybe I was seeing everything through thick smoke. I tried to stand, managed only to fall prone to the ground. Now, when I first saw him, I thought I was hallucinating. It was a tall man, wearing denim overalls, a straw hat. And he approached me and he helped me to my feet. "You look parched," he said kindly around that pipe he held in his mouth, and offered me a drink from an old army canteen. And then, once he'd helped me up, he helped me down the road a ways until the smell of that smoke subsided and the heat became more bearable. As we walked, I tried to thank him, but could only manage a coughing fit. And he just smiled. A little ways up the road, he helped me to sit on a guardrail there at the side of the road. I looked up the road in the direction of my friend's house, and I was going to tell him that that's where I needed to get. But when I looked back to speak to that nice man, I was all alone there on the side of the road. I sat there for a bit, recovering and very confused. Maybe the nice man had figured he'd done his bit to help and had just headed on back home. Well, I continued on up the road to my friend's house, and when I got there, my friend seemed concerned. He told me to look in the mirror, and that's when I saw my face and my arms were covered in what looked like severe sunburn. or like I'd been standing too close to a large bonfire. The rest of that summer was uncomfortable for me as I recovered from that sunburn. And I didn't make many trips to my friend's house down Bridgers Road after that. It was much more scenic to take the long way, after all. When fall came and the weather finally truly cooled down, I finally drove back down Bridgers Road again, and I stopped at the closest house to where my car had been broken down. I knocked on the door, and it was answered by a sweet-looking old lady. I introduced myself and explained that I was looking for the man that had helped me. I wanted to thank him. Well, she told me that she had lived there all alone. So I described that man to her. She got this sad look on her face, and then she smiled. And she said, "That sounds like my husband, Hollis." Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this little story about the spirit of Bridgers Road. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, comment. I'm Skaji.